heat-related deaths in urban areas. So I'm just going to spend a little bit of time diving a bit deeper into these tree benefits. And if you're already like fully convinced, like I love trees and want to plant trees, we have found that knowing some of these benefits or being able to source them, if you have to, propose to your organization or house of worship the benefit of doing this project, you could find some of the benefits that would connect with the organization that you are representing or working with. So the first I want to highlight are physical benefits to human beings, and this can apply to animals as well for related to like air quality. So cleaner air is something that trees offer by filtering airborne pollutants, which can help, especially those that have asthma, and it can lower dust levels by 27 to 42%. I'm very allergic to dust, so I was quite thrilled to learn this stat. They can increase safety. Well-maintained parks with trees are associated with reduced gun violence and improved safety overall for communities. They can reduce heat-related illness. As we saw in the last quote, by reducing the ambient temperature, especially in urban areas, trees can reduce heat-related illness by providing shade. And related to their ability to reduce pollution in the air, trees can also improve cardiovascular health. And then related to mental health, trees are known to reduce our stress hormone, the cortisol hormone, and lower blood pressure. And I thought this was particularly interesting. Living about 300 feet from a tree can reduce rates of depression. Trees can help our brain function, including enhancing our ability to learn and think, and then green spaces can also help enhance our memory. So stepping away from our physical and mental well-being, trees can also benefit our environment by reducing our need for using, electricity and gas, and also reduce our energy bills and produce financial savings as well. So a young, healthy tree can cool air like a 10-room size air conditioners operating 20 hours a day. So it has kind of powerful cooling effects. And then if they're strategically planted near buildings, they can reduce air conditioning needs by 30%. And that can also help save 20 to 50% in heating energy bills during the colder months. And so obviously that will reduce energy bills. And there's also an association of trees planted near properties, increasing property values by 10 to 15%. Another benefit of trees are the ability for it to slow, like when there's a lot of rain and there's a lot of water flowing in the streets. As I'm sure we've all seen at this point, the trees can help manage stormwater by reducing the volume and speed of water entering the drainage system. So by reducing the pace at which the water is flowing, it can increase the ability of our stormwater systems to be able to handle that water and reduce flooding risk. This can obviously save money, and when basements flood or homes flood, the increased risk of mold and airborne toxins is also reduced by having that flooding prevented. Just as an example of the power of just one tree, over 20 years, one maple tree can intercept 27,000 gallons of rainwater and avoid up to 4,800 gallons of runoff. So there's a lot of physical, financial, and emotional benefits to trees. And we have a couple green teams in the Faith and Place Network that have adopted, the tree planting project prior to, this particular funding opportunity. But they kind of did what this funding opportunity is supporting new houses of worship and communities to do. So I wanted to share about two of those. The first is First Presbyterian Church in Danville, Illinois. And you can see here in the slide, they had kind of just a, a bare space outside of their house of worship and decided to plant trees in that empty lot. And it has become a place where the neighbors come, they have picnic tables, there's like a magnolia tree. It's like a really beautiful and green space now, that they have 16 trees, and they also planted native shrubs. So one of their church members just highlighted the importance of improving the air quality by planting the trees. And then the Reverend Schwartz of that house of worship shared from a spiritual perspective that for her, planting trees is a holy and hopeful act. They provide refuge for birds and animals, shade for the neighborhood, and beauty and oxygen for all of us. And then another house of worship that planted trees, and they also planted fruit trees specifically, is Shelbyville Community Garden at First Presbyterian Church in Shelbyville. And they, in conjunction with several community organizations, came together and planted trees and now produce up to 1,000 pounds of fresh produce each year to their local food pantry. And they have volunteers from the community, high schoolers helping them plant and maintain that space. So very cool stories from houses of worship kind of doing these tree planting projects. All right, so those are the benefits and some inspiration from houses of worship doing this type of project. So now I'm going to spend a few minutes going into the practical side of tree planting, some common concerns, and some considerations that can help alleviate those concerns. Okay, so in doing workshops like this, we ask like what concerns or hesitations do you have in planting trees? And these were a few things that people shared. And as someone with a lot of trees around my house, I can definitely commiserate with a lot of these concerns. So one would be trees attracting rodents or insects, the cost for planting, maintenance, or removal, trees causing property damage to sidewalks and buildings, their association with increasing allergies, the labor needed to take care of the trees, rake leaves, etc. And then concerns around trees blocking the line of sight in an area, and that making it easier for crime to take place. So in addressing these concerns, a lot of the considerations or concerns can be alleviated up front by carefully selecting the type of tree you plant and the location of where that tree is. So we have a few arborists that have provided some advice around that, which I'll highlight in a minute. But I'll also go over some of the responses that they shared to that. So one is that related to concerns around trees shortening the lifespan of a paved parking lot or sidewalks. There were kind of two things that our arborist highlighted. One, that specific trees can actually extend the life of pavement, because if they're blocking the heat and the cooling of the asphalt and reducing, that hot temperature, it can actually minimize the shrinking and the stretching of the asphalt and prolong its life. And so selecting the type of tree that makes sense in your area, and then just making sure that it is at least 5 feet from any type of sidewalk or foundation will reduce the chance that any roots would, break apart concrete or disturb any paved spaces or buildings. Around the concerns for the cost of purchasing and planting and maintaining trees, this grant luckily has the funding needed to both purchase, plant, and then maintain the trees during their time of establishing. So when they need the most water and care, this grant will be providing the financial means to support either those at your organization and employees for doing that maintenance work, or you can also contract out to a local, lawn service tree keeping company. In regards to concerns around pollen or allergies, there are lower pollen or non-allergenic trees you could select. And then, as I mentioned, around having 5 feet of space between a tree and any type of concrete foundation, asphalt. You can also be thoughtful if you're concerned about the line of sight and crime around a property. You can plant trees with that in mind, so you don't disrupt any type of line of sight. So I just want to take a minute and pause there. You can either share in the chat, or if you just want to kind of think through a couple of pros or cons that come to mind for your particular community for planting where you are located. So feel free to just think like, oh, these are some pros from the benefits of the health benefits or the economic benefits, or benefits for our environment, or also if you still have any concerns. And we can work to address those in our questions later on. So feel free to add any to the chat. And while you're doing that, I'm going to transition into talking about the specific opportunity that we have for these grants. So overall, Faith in Place is working to distribute 65 to 85 grants. So we have a lot of houses of worship and community organizations that can be funded. And those grants will be up to $30,000. The grant can go to an organization or house of worship in Illinois, Wisconsin, or Indiana that are located in environmental justice community. And I'll dive into the details of that in a second. And it's intended for planting and maintaining the trees on the property. And we also are including a workforce component. And more details are coming out on that probably in the next week, just some ideas, which I'll touch on here for including a workforce component in your grant application. So let's start with eligibility. Who can apply to this grant opportunity? So there's kind of two categories. If you are a community organization, you must have 501c3 designation. And then if you are a house of worship, you can be a 501c3, but you don't have to be. Organizations and houses of worship that apply must be located in a CGS census tract. And I will show you on the next slide how to check that for your location. And just so you know, that CGS census tract is something that is designated by the federal government. So we at Faith in Place don't have any control over the algorithm and the factors that it considers in those designations. But I will show you how to check for your property. And then if you are a 501c3 organization, but you have a fiscal sponsor, your sponsor's address must also be located in a CGS community. And if you are planting, you can own your property. If you don't own your property, you're still eligible. You just need to have written permission from the owner to plant trees. And we do have a template that you can utilize to request that permission. And then, as this is an opportunity funded by the federal government, we require, or the federal government requires, that any employees at your organization or house of worship must have I-9 forms on record. So now I'm going to show you about the CGS designation. So it's going to be an interactive moment. Our team just chatted the link that I'm going to be showing you. So feel free to follow along now, or you can also check later and just watch me as I am walking through these steps. So let me show you what this tool looks like. So when you are checking to see if you're eligible, you're going to be taken to this climate and economic justice screening tool. And you're going to see here a map of the United States, and then it has this address bar. So what I'm going to do is, sorry, I am just pulling up the address I'm copying over from this slide. Give me 1 second. All right, so the first house of worship I'm going to check. Both houses of worship are green teams that we work with. So the first one is the address for a temple. So what you'll do is you'll type your address for your house of worship into the search bar, click the little magnifying glass, and then it's going to zoom into your address. What you're going to need to do is click once in that area, and it's going to select the census tract that your house of worship or community organization is located in. And then it's going to show you over on the right-hand side is the area identified as disadvantaged. So this says no, and that means that this particular house of worship would not be eligible to apply for this opportunity. I saw a question in the chat about like what factors go into considering if a property is identified as disadvantaged or not. And you can explore it down here. They have all of the different risk factors or kind of categories that are compiled into this assessment. So you could click and expand and see specifics around each of these areas for your property if you're curious like what goes into this final decision of identifying a property or a census tract as this disadvantaged or not. So this particular one is no. Let me select the other one. So this is our green team over at Stone Temple. So when I click that, it's going to, again, take me to this, it zooms right into where the house of worship is. So just click once, it's going to select the census tract. And then you can see here, this is what it will look like if your property or census tract is eligible for this application. So if it says yes, then you're good to go. If it says no, then you wouldn't be eligible for this particular opportunity. Okay, so all right, navigating between screens. Let me represent my slides. All right. So now that we've been able to check on the specific property, you will know if you're eligible or not just based off of location, which is the biggest factor. So we have a bunch of resources and guidance set up for if you are eligible and interested in applying, how to create your application. So I want to highlight the application toolkit and a few other of the resources, and then all of them are available on the website, which we will link and we'll send a follow-up email. So all of the resources I'm going to share are already available on our website, as well as a recording of a workshop just like this one, if you have any questions and want to rewatch a portion. So let me share what the toolkit looks like and give you a sense of what guidance it can provide. So the toolkit looks like this. And what it does is basically, it starts off with the rubric of how the the applications will be assessed so you can see how to make your application score high and increase the chances of you being selected as an awardee of the grant. And then it goes through all of the specific information that you'll be required to input into the online portal. So all of the applications will be submitted through an online portal, and all of the components that will be required of you to submit are all listed here. And if anything is a bit confusing or needs extra explanation or guidance, we've tried to include a guide or tips. So let me just give you some examples. When you're doing the first step will be an eligibility questionnaire, just to make sure your location is within one of the census tracts that is eligible. You'll need to complete some basic information about your organization, your contact information, and then you have to include a UEI number. But if you don't know what a UEI number is or don't know if you have one, we have a quick start guide for how to sign up for getting one of those for free. So that's just an example of like, oh, if you get to something in an application and you're not sure what it is, check out this application toolkit, because we have tried to provide examples of everything that we thought might be a bit confusing or need some more information and clarity shared. We have, I'll just highlight a few other things that we have included. We've included a full project proposal example, a template. We have recommended tree species list that I'll share more about in a minute. And then for each of the questions that you would be required to respond to for the application, we have some sample questions of like what to consider, what to include, some ideas. Again, like a template for requesting permission from a property owner to plant. So anything that we thought there could be some helpful tips on, or a template, or anything like that, we've included in the application toolkit here. So really take a look at that as you're working through creating an application, because it's going to have a lot of helpful information. Okay, now let me go back. All right, so the next thing I'm going to talk about is the type of trees that you'll want to be looking for and purchasing for this particular grant. We've had questions around what type of tree, what size of tree, if you can plant from a seedling, et cetera, et cetera. So let me just answer those questions. And we have some more information in our toolkit as well. So basically, you're going to be planting saplings. So they're trees that are the trunk is 1 to 2 inches wide, and you'll see the technical term is caliper. So if you see anywhere where it says 1 to 2 inch caliper, it's talking about the thickness of the trunk. So I had no idea what that meant. So I made this diagram for myself. And that can be, it depends on the species, how tall that means a tree is. It could be, I've seen everywhere from 8 to 14 feet. But if you're at a nursery looking for trees, and you can say, a 1 to 2 inch caliper tree. And that will help that's a good tree size to plant, both to be able to establish and have tree canopy quickly, but also it's small enough that it won't just keel over in a year. So it kind of balances the ability of a seedling to really take root. Planting from a seed, and also just planting a giant tree, which doesn't have enough time to establish in the ground. All right, so that's the size tree. And then what we have is a list of allowable tree species. And we just worked with our our arborist to come up with this list, and I will show you what that list looks like. And obviously, it's linked on the website, linked in the toolkit, linked everywhere. You are welcome to plant trees that aren't on this list, but we would need to pre-approve those. So you can just shoot an email to grants@faithandplace.org if you are interested in planting a tree that's not listed here. And the reason we have a recommended tree list is because we wanted to be able to make recommendations of non-invasive trees that are also like well suited to growing, not too hard to grow. And our arborist kind of made recommendations that are non-invasive and ones that he thought would be like helpful for houses of worship to know about. So we have two categories of trees. We have fruit and nut bearing trees here. And then we have non-fruit and nut-bearing trees. So you can see it has like the species name, and then it has the common name, the mature height and width, and then some other kind of planting considerations. One of the most important considerations to think through is the mature height and mature width. So whenever you're deciding what type of tree to plant, you can kind of work backwards from what is the space for that tree to grow. And that will kind of easily help you narrow down which tree might make sense for that particular area based on like this. The pecan tree can grow to 100 feet versus, this apple tree grows to 15 to 20 feet. So that could help you decide between, narrow down your options. If you have any, as I mentioned, any trees that you're interested in planting not listed on here, it doesn't mean it's a no. And you can find here just to please reach out to our team and we'll just get approval. Okay. And then the next slide, instead of sharing the slide, I'm just going to share with you the two documents that are on it because I'm already on this screen. So we have also included the activities that you can use this grant funding to support. So your organization or house of worship can use the grant funding to support employee time or their fringe benefits to plant and maintain trees if you would like your staff to work on it. Alternatively, you don't have to have employees that are working on it. You could have contractors that are hired to plant and maintain the trees. And then if you are wanting to like incorporate youth, if you want to work with youth at your house of worship, or if you're a community org and have youth or community members that might want like a stipend, like come help, plant trees and water them once a week and get a stipend for that, this could provide funding for that. And then so that's kind of the labor piece. And then for the actual trees and supplies, we have the allowable tree list, which I just went over. And then we also have a list of supplies. So let me show you that. So our allowable supplies are basically any supplies that directly help plant or maintain the trees. Any that we've had questions about so far, we've gotten answered and added here. If you have a supply that isn't listed on this that you're curious about, again, just shoot us an email. And we will check with our program officer if we can use the grant funding to support that item. But you'll see here, all of these items are the ones that you can use the grant for, everything from gardening materials to shovels, irrigation system. We had a question around like ladders for people that needed to climb and reach the branches. So all of that would be approved and permitted. Things that aren't permitted would be kind of like accessories to a garden, or like garden benches, paving stones, lights, decor, lawnmower. Lawnmower is not really decoration, but it's not directly related to planting and maintaining a tree. If you have any questions about things that aren't on this particular list, again, just shoot us an email. We'll get the answer for you. All right. So, sorry, just navigating all my share screens. All right, we have gone through the application toolkit, what to plant, what you can charge to the grant. And I just also want to highlight that we have a budget template. So it's an Excel form and includes kind of like the categories, and you can basically use the template just to plug in your expenses. And when you have to submit a budget for the application, you can update the template with your own numbers, reflecting your project plan, and then submit that. So we have that available for download. All right, I'm going to do some kind of like general tips that we have received either from our program officer or from the committee working on, making sure everyone has the information needed for this grant. So I'll just highlight these quickly, but then you can dive into them. They're all available on our website on the resource section for this opportunity. So the first, if you're like me, I knew very little about planting and maintaining trees. So I was very grateful. We have friends at Open Lands, which is an organization dedicated to tree planting in kind of the greater Chicago area. And they have a couple great tutorials we've linked on the website, both around planting a tree. It's pretty quick, like a 10-minute video, but it explains all the components you need. And then also they have a video on watering the tree. So if you're wondering just kind of like practically how to go about that in a way that will make your tree thrive, watch those 2 videos on our website. And then some general but important tips. The first is, before you dig for tree planting, make sure that you call your local utility group. You have to call to make sure that where you're digging won't hit any lines, fiber optics, et cetera, at least 72 hours before that. So we've included the number there. And then on our website, there's also a link to a website that includes kind of like all of the call numbers across the country. So just find your local number and call. For me, I live in Springfield, Illinois, and there's actually a quick online form that I was able to fill out, and they came out in less than 24 hours to approve me. So just make sure you do that before your planting day. So if you're having a big planting day on like a Saturday, make sure, towards the beginning of the previous week, you have called and you are approved to dig. If you are wanting to plant edible fruit and nut trees and eat the fruits off of it, you can do a soil test to avoid unwanted contamination. If that relates to your specific site and you're curious to learn more, there's some resources from extension programs at local universities that often offer that, and we can also help research opportunities depending on location. And then, as I mentioned previously, one of the easiest ways to prevent damage to paved areas, walkways, parking lots, is to plant no closer than 2 feet from paved areas and preferably at least 5 feet away. So as I mentioned, really considering the type of tree and the location of the tree can help avoid many of the concerns that we have in tree planting. Some other helpful tips that our program officer has shared from the Forest Service is around mulching. You can see here, I see this all the time with freshly planted trees where you kind of make like a little dome. You actually don't want to do a dome. You want to do a donut. So just remember, donut, no dome. And when you're mulching, so mulch helps prevent evaporation and keeps the water in the tree, the water in the ground, the tree have the level of moisture it wants. So in order to help retain water but not hurt the trunk of the tree itself, you would do this donut pattern. But as it says here, don't put the mulch against the bark. And then our program officer doesn't recommend fertilizer or compost for the tree, especially fertilizer, because it basically helps the tree grow at a pace faster than it should be naturally growing. So it actually helps establish a stronger tree by not providing kind of those extra nutrients. And then the most important part of successfully maintaining trees will be to plan to water your tree around 15 gallons a week during growing season for 3 years. So I mentioned there is a video from Open Lands that goes through that. We've linked on the page. But in the video, it has some very easy practical tips on how to do that. But the watering plan is really critical to the tree successfully establishing and growing. So when you're creating your application, make sure to really have a strong watering plan. And it's not complicated anything about the watering itself, but just making sure that the trees consistently have that watering for the growing season for 3 years. And then some other just general tips. What we've noticed is about 25% of a budget for tree planting and 75% for tree keeping and tree maintenance is how the funding proportions normally divvy up. And then I just wanted to say, keep an eye out. We're going to be sending out an email with some specific ideas, just kind of general tips on including a workforce component. Namely, like if you want to have a workshop at your house of worship or organization on some forestry career opportunities, we have some connections that we're finalizing where you could invite them to share about what type of forestry careers are available in your local area, or ways to include companies that are equitably focused on equitable hiring for maintaining trees. So we've tried to break down a few ideas into kind of simple things that you can incorporate into your application, and are just working on finalizing that resource, and we'll be sending that out shortly. Okay, so practically, let's say you think you're eligible, you're interested, what do you do? So the first step would be to submit an eligibility questionnaire, and it's called LOI on our portal. Just if you see that, don't be confused. So on the website and in our follow-up email, you'll see the link to completing that eligibility questionnaire, and you'll first create an account on our grant portal, and then you'll be able to submit that eligibility questionnaire. And we have a video kind of guiding you through that step, what it looks like practically when you're in the portal. So it's me in the video, so I'll walk you through that, and you'll be able to complete the eligibility questionnaire. When you submit that, our team will check if you're eligible, and if you are, you'll receive an invite through the same portal to complete the full application. And you have several months to do that. The deadline for completing and submitting the full application is November 21st. Applications will be reviewed after the 21st, and then we'll be announcing the winners, the awardees of the grants, no later than January 15th of 2025. And then what will happen is we will work with all of the awardees to get a contract signed, and then we'll be dispersing a amount of the total funds up front, and we'll host kind of a practical webinar on what type of reporting, answering very practical questions, and all of that. We'll have a lot of resources for the awardees at that time, and be able to really provide any type of support that you need with our grants team. Specifically, Angie, our grants management coordinator, will be providing a lot of support when the actual awardees are selected and are working on implementing their project. As I've mentioned a million times now, we have everything that I've shared is linked on our website, including a recording of a webinar like this that I did a few weeks ago. So you are welcome to look through all of that. We'll also include, a follow-up email that links to these resources. But anything that I shared is already available to you, so don't feel like you have to wait for that follow-up email. All right. That is my overview, and I've tried to leave some time to go over questions. So I know several came through, and Kira, can I have you help me sort through questions?
Yep. So just one that came up, and I think it was answered in the chat, but it would be worth you answering too, is can we use the grant to plant trees in the community where the church is? For example, we're looking to plant trees in the Austin neighborhood near United Methodist Church there. Would that fit within the eligibility requirements?
Yeah. So if you have your house of worship location and are wanting to plant trees that are not on your particular property, it's not a yes or a no. It depends where the trees you want to plant would be located. So in your eligibility questionnaire, you would want to include the address of those, you know, the properties where you're wanting to plant the trees, and you would need to get written permission from the property owner. So if all of the properties are, also in the same census tract or also a disadvantaged census tract near you, then they would be eligible from like a geographic perspective. And then you would just need that written permission. And the goal of the written permission is, the Forest Service really wanting the trees to have a strong chance of establishing and being maintained over the years. So as long as you can get those two things, then it would be eligible.
Great. So let's see. Do you have any suggestions about working with a city government or other municipal or state agencies to do the planning in this sort of project?
Yes. So I'm not sure. Feel free to ask a follow-up question if this doesn't quite get to what you're asking. So we often refer, like, for example, if a organization isn't eligible based off their location for this, we've been helping connect them to kind of municipal or tree planting projects that their local city or whatever is putting on, so that they can still plant trees, but just not with the funding from this particular opportunity. And then also, if, for example, you have an organization and there's space on the right of way in front of you that you'd like to plant trees on, but it's not technically your property, it would be the like municipal property or whatever. You're eligible to plant there. You would just need permission from the municipality or whoever is overseeing that space. So from like a bigger perspective, this funding is all provided through the IRA, Inflation Reduction Act, and it's being dispersed through the Forest Service, and they have other grant opportunities that are going through like municipal and state kind of governments. So it's a big bucket of funding, and we're just one of the partners dispersing it. So I'm not sure. I tried to touch on that from a couple of angles. I'm not sure I got what you were asking, but hopefully that
Yeah,
helped.
I think that works.
Yeah.
Okay, so another question that just came in. We have planted most of the native trees, shrubs, and plants, but have more need of funds to employ youth in the neighborhood to maintain the area of trees with weeding, watering, etc. Would this qualify?
Uh, sorry, the audio cut out a little bit. Would it
Oh,
qualify just to maintain already planted trees?
yes.
The Forest Service wants to increase the tree canopy. So for questions like this that have come in, it's been kind of like you could use some of the funding to maintain existing, but they want the vast majority of the project and the funding proposal to be for planting new trees, maintaining new trees. There's similar, or I mean, kind of complementary questions around, like if you have an invasive tree or a tree that needs to be removed from your space, could you use this funding to remove it and then plant a new one? And there was a bit of hesitancy around that, just because the overarching goal is to increase tree canopy. So the recommendation from the program officer was to, in a proposal, have at least 2 to 1, like plant 2 trees if you have to remove one. So I wouldn't recommend any proposal including too much maintenance of existing trees or removal of existing trees. If it's a small component, I think it could be considered, but I wouldn't recommend that being like the sole component, and definitely complement it with a lot of tree planting plans.
I think those are all the questions that I'm seeing now.
Okay.
If anyone has other questions, please drop them in the chat.
I'll just give another second for any questions to pop up. If you don't have questions, I recommend exploring, you can kind of take some time to digest with everything on the website. As I mentioned, if you're interested in doing the eligibility questionnaire, you'll be able to see that linked on the website. Let me just pull that up quickly so you have a practical sense. Just one second. All right, let me just show you the website page. Okay, so this is what the page looks like, and you'll see more information about the opportunity, kind of the details that I've shared. And then also, if you're ready to start the application, you'll click that and it'll take you to the steps to do it. So you are doing this, the first step, attending a workshop. And then you can see the 5 steps laid out for completing the application. So as I've mentioned, the first step would be creating an account, and then the video guide on how to do that in case you have any hiccups is right here. And then once you've created your account, you'll be able to complete the eligibility questionnaire, and that'll collect information about your geographic location, your own information, and then if you aren't the leader of your house of worship or your organization, kind of an executive officer's information. And then once you complete that, you'll wait to hear from us. And if you meet the criteria, you'll be able to complete the full application, and you'll have until November 21st. So all that information is here. And then all the application toolkits, the templates, the list of supplies, the list of recommended trees, they're all here, including the slides that I just went over. And we've had questions from other applicants come in, and any question that I think another person might have, I've tried to include here in the FAQs. So if you have a question, you're more than welcome to check out these FAQs and see if someone else has already asked and we have an answer. And if not, feel free to email us at grants@faithandplace.org, and we will get an answer for you. So lots of FAQs that came in. And then the tree planting tips and resources I referred to are here. So the call number, considering the right tree size and the right location, and watering, these are kind of the 3 quintessential steps to success. And then we've included some tree planting videos that I referred to. The Morton Arboretum has a tree tool with a lot of details about each tree species. So if you're looking for more information about a specific tree, you can use that tool. It's really helpful. And then there's also a tree planting guide by the Forest Service. It's very lengthy and black and white. So it has every detail you could ever imagine if you if you can get through reading it. I like the videos. So there's a how to plant a tree and how to water a tree by our friends over at Open Land. So those are the resources that we've shared in the FAQs, and we're adding to this every week as more people share questions and stuff. So again, please feel free to reach out. We are trying to make this as supportive as possible. All right.
Elena, we got one more question that I think is worth answering, which is,
Yeah.
can four collaborating parishes all in a disadvantaged area submit a group application?
Great. Yeah, we've had a question, a like similar genre of question. So one of the, unless you have a group, a group organization that's a 501c3, you would have to have one be a primary applicant. And that one, if they're all eligible, then great. But that one house of worship, or you said parishes, was that the entity?
Yeah. Yep.
One parish would be the primary applicant, because one would need to be responsible for signing the contract and, receiving the funds, submitting they'll be like, reporting for getting the funding and checking in on the progress of the project. So that one applicant would need to be, the primary applicant, and then you could have support from the other organizations in actually completing the project. So in your like maintenance plan or your planting plan, please describe the collaboration. That would make for a strong application. But just practically, we need to have one primary applicant that would be the person completing the grant contract and things like that. All right. Anything else?
I think that's it.
Okay, great. So we just have 1 minute left. So I'm glad the timing worked out with questions. Thank you everyone for coming. Again, the website is live. All of the resources are live. So feel free to, take a look at that and email us if you have any questions before you feel comfortable doing the eligibility questionnaire. And I think that's it for me. So thank you so much for being with us in our final bonus session of our summit. I hope this was helpful, and I hope everyone has a great Thursday. So bye, everyone. Thank you so much for being with us.